Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jenny Trays, the Community and Partnerships Manager here at LegalGAPS. We hope that you're enjoying your time at the FundPlay Summit, and we're now about to start our final presentation of the day on fundraising, managing your donors, board members, and volunteers. I'm so excited to welcome my friend and mentor, Amanda Kraus, to the stage. So go ahead and join me, Amanda. As of November 2020, Amanda is the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of US Rowing, where she is building a more effective and a more inclusive rowing community. Before that, we worked together for 10 years at Row New York, a sports-based youth development organization that transforms the lives of youth across New York City through the sport of rowing. Amanda founded the organization in 2002 and grew it from serving one boat of 9 girls back in 2002 to serving over 5,000 student athletes each year. Amanda is a passionate leader, visionary, fundraising and nonprofit expert, and I'm so thrilled she's back here at the FundPlay Summit to join all of us. Amanda is going to dig into fundraising best practices and share her point of view to make us all feel a bit more comfortable with our approach to raising money for our programs. We'll also hear from Luke Sims, the Executive Director of RallyCap Sports, one of our FundPlay partners. Amanda, I'm so excited to see your face and have you back here. So take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks. Good to see you too. And I'm so excited to be at the FundPlay Summit with you all this afternoon. I think we have some slides coming up here soon, but in the meantime, in addition to, dipping my toe into fundraising for the first time when I started Row New York in 2002, and then learning a lot along the way, I also teach fundraising at NYU at Wagner's to graduate students at Wagner here in New York City. So I've been doing this for a little bit and love talking about it, and will welcome your questions. I really want to make this as interactive as possible. So I wonder if I have John a signal for next slide. I'll just do this. Oh, thank you. Yeah, we can keep going. Perfect. So I always like to start with getting a sense of who is there in the audience, especially since I cannot see any of you. And so I would start with asking, what are our fundraising fears? But maybe I'll just ask, what do people think of when they think of fundraising? Are people able to enter things into the chat, or is it the Q&A? Let's do chat. If people can put it into the chat, what's one word you think of when you think of fundraising? And it doesn't have to be positive. It can be a fear. It can be positive. So give me a sense of how you feel about fundraising. Being turned down. Yes, Luke. Begging. Asking for a favor. That's important to think about. Where to start? Reluctant pockets. Patience. I think that's my favorite word. Yes, a lot of writing. Necessary. Asking too much and have too many. Right. Yeah, so mostly, these are mostly negatives, right? But some things that are sort of just benign, like, how do I do this right? Power dynamics. We could do a whole session on that, right? We don't have time for that, but love that topic or subtopic. Landing the right pitch. Okay, great. Yes. Oh, Rob, we have a positive citizen here. Right. When people start to get behind something, right, it builds momentum, and then more people start giving money, which is when it gets really fun, right? So some of you might be in those beginning grind days right now where you're just starting to raise money. Some of you might have been at it for a long time. It would be helpful for me to know, in terms of who's in the audience, where are we? Like, what size budgets are we talking about? And are you fundraisers, executive directors, both? All executive directors are fundraisers. But do we have development people, and what size are your operating budgets? Great. Okay, Jackie's the perfect audience here. What else? Otherwise, this is all going to be geared towards Jackie. $2 million, VP of development, 300K. Yeah, Jackie's like, that's perfect. Okay, 3 million. So we're top is 3 million budget right now. And then we have some more modest budgets, and that's okay. Row New York started with $5. So smaller. I'm thinking seems like smaller groups. I just want to keep that in mind. That's all good. You know, the basics remain the same regardless of the budget size. It's just, you know, you sort of go at it in a different way, slightly different way. So let's go over, oh, good, we have a director of development too. So let's start with, you know, where does money come from? I think, you know, let's all be sure we know the buckets. So we have individuals, that's from people, right? It's corporations, their events, there's government funding. Some organizations have earned income. So maybe there's something that you do at your organization that you can charge a fee for, and that's how you bring in income. Let's go to the next slide, please. Keep going, please. And next. Great. So I would say no matter what size organization you work for, you should carve out a day with your team. And if your team is just you and your dog and your coffee, that's fine too. And just come up with what your plan is going to be for the year for fundraising. So capture every revenue stream. And maybe that's just foundations and individuals. That's okay. And really write out the plan. So from foundations, these are the foundations I will approach. These are the individuals we will approach. And then really start to get into, you know, maybe create a sheet for each of those. X foundation for this amount of money. This is, and then even include probability weighted revenue. So we're going to ask them for $10,000. They've never heard of us. I'm going to put that at 10%, right? That will come through. And then you'll start to get a picture as you add all of these up of where you think this money will come from, right? In the early years of Row New York, I would chase after anything and everything I could without a lot of discipline, definitely a lot of hard work and commitment, not a lot of discipline or strategy, right? It was more just, I'm going to just bring in as much money as I can from anyone I possibly can. And you really want to start to think about pretty quickly, well, how do I prioritize? I only have so many hours in the day, who I'm going to spend time with, right? And more as you have less time. So if I'm, you know, talking to somebody who's just, you know, not going to be a big supporter, I'll spend 10 minutes on the phone with them. I was on a call with someone today who I thought was going to be 20 minutes. He's a billionaire. We talked for 2 hours. And I didn't have 2 hours, but guess what? Like, that's what you do, right? So you're really thinking about your priorities. Look back at the year before and think about, you know, base this year on, well, how did we do last year? So you're really sort of thinking about your planning based on how you've done in the past and what you want to do in the future. And you do that across all of your categories. And then under each category, create a little narrative for each. So if you're saying, you know, we're going to hold 2 events and one's going to raise $10,000 and one's going to raise $100,000, and one is a ping pong tournament, you know, spell out on this Excel sheet how that ping pong tournament will bring in money, and then write a little narrative about it. You know, this is going to be a really affordable gathering for folks, target age 20 to going to be fun. We're going to get people together to learn about the organization. And then you can actually share this with your board, get them on board, and use this as your roadmap for fundraising. Does anyone know what a pipeline is when it comes to fundraising? Want to put it in the chat? I'm glad. Yes. Right. It's exactly that. It's your prospect list. So it's really being deliberate about, these are the people I'm going to reach out to. They have capacity. They have interest in the organization, or they have a good connection with me or with a board member. And that's how you manage sort of what you do from week to week, month to month. And let's go to the next slide, Tex. Next. Okay, so we're going to talk about, does anyone get corporate funding? Throw that in the chat. Yes, no, a little bit. Yes, oh, good. A bit, a little bit. Okay. So, oh, good. All right. I would not, and this is only my opinion. I'm only representing myself here. I'm not a big advocate for putting a lot of time or energy into corporate funding unless you see you find a good match there. Most smaller organizations aren't going to find a ton of corporate support, in my experience. There have been anomalies when I was at Row New York, and we had a board member with certain corporate connections here in New York City where we'd actually end up bringing in a lot of support. But, unless you're at a much larger organization like Teach for America or American Red Cross, where the corporations get a lot of visibility and exposure because they're supporting what you do, it's hard to lock in. It's been my experience, it's hard to lock in larger dollars there. Not to say I don't recommend pursuing it. It's just, I think it can be difficult. Let's go on to the next slide. So anyone get government funding where they are? Yes, no, yes, no, some local, right. What's great about public funding, government funding? Anyone want to answer that? I don't ask rhetorical questions, so jump in, tell me what's good about it. No one has anything good to say about government funding. That's okay. So yes, Caleb is right. He gets a cookie. Yeah, mostly it's very easy to renew, right? Once you're sort of in their pipeline, you just, it just keeps coming. So that's great. The challenges are the applications, at least that I've been a part of, are no joke, right? They're really cumbersome. Often you need to hire an outside person to actually complete the application. Not easy to do. I'm certainly not discouraging it, but they can be tough. Also, once you get the funding, it doesn't necessarily mean you have the cash in hand. So sometimes you have to actually spend the time getting the money that you've received on paper, and that can be hard too. So next slide. All right, individuals. I would say most of the time for organizations of your sizes, this is where you're going to find the most potential for revenue, the most low-hanging fruit. And, unless you have earned income that makes you sort of unique, this is where I would put a lot of your energy. And just remember that individual supporters are sort of everywhere you look, right? They're the parents of the kids who do the sports with you. They are volunteers. Volunteers turn into really phenomenal funders because they're close to the action. Obviously, your board members, and we'll talk more about them in a minute. In terms of, best practices with individuals, I would say you want to make sure you, one, always do your homework, right? So you know who you're meeting with and what they're interested in, what they've supported in the past. And then you want to make sure that when you do meet with them, they have a really positive experience. So they come and see your program in action. If you run a basketball program, bring them to a game when you can, post-COVID. Really connect the dots in terms of like what is interesting to them and what inspires them. And then like the secret sauce to fundraising, does anyone know what it is? Or I mean, this is what I think it is. What's the secret sauce to fundraising with individuals? Yes, Jackie, you get a cookie too. That's right. It's relationship building. And that can sound a little bit like you have to build relationships, but it really, really is. That's exactly what it is, right? I think one of the things that has made me successful at fundraising, and trust me, I've not been successful at every portion of running a nonprofit, but fundraising I have been, and I think so much of that is just relationship building. It's really, you want, if it's not you, if this is not your, your thing, then you need someone on your staff who really knows how to and enjoys people and building relationships and getting to know people and, really excited about what it is that your organization does, whether it's tennis for kids, it's soccer for kids, it's basketball and tutoring, someone who can really build relationships with people who can be funders or convert them to funders and supporters. So You want to build trust with those people. You want to get to know who they are and what they're interested in. And that's when you really start to see, and in the beginning, I always say to people, I have a new team now of fundraisers here at US Rowing. And I always say to them, don't make fundraising transactional. Don't just send an email that says, can you send $25,000? Can we sign you up? Wait to make the asks, right? It's better to wait and wait and wait and wait. It's sort of like training, right? If you're an athlete, it's not every day is race day. Most days are just training days. And so with fundraising with individuals, it's mostly just building relationships. It's having lunches. It's taking phone calls. It's making phone calls. It's thinking of them and asking about how, did their kids get into high school or the college? How was their ski trip? Really building that relationship. And then when the time comes to say, hey, will you buy a table at our event? Will you support this program that we're launching? You've done all the hard work. You've done all the lifting and the training, right? And that makes it more, it's relationship based and it's not transactional. Do people have any questions about that and individuals? I'm sort of monologuing here, which I'd like to avoid. I don't know if that goes in the chat or the Q&A. Do I have to go back and forth? Let's see. I don't see anything in Q&A. So maybe if people have any questions in the chat, would you consider, oh, that's such a good question. Would you consider family foundations individuals? Yes. Most of the time, yes, right? Because people who have a lot of capacity to give have family. I don't have a family foundation, but a lot of people do, right? And if you have a lot of money, it makes sense to have a foundation. But the foundation is simply an extension of that individual and that family, right? Sometimes the foundation grows out of one family member and it becomes a more sort of typical foundation. But very often, they're just extensions of an individual. Regardless, whoever is the point person at that foundation, whether it's a program officer or it's just a very wealthy individual who says, the check will come from my family foundation. Either way, you want to build a relationship with that individual, right? The program officers, they're the gatekeepers at foundation. So even if they are not the decision makers, they will help advocate for you and your organization with their board. So those people are really key, and you need to build relationships with them just as if they were individual supporters writing a check themselves. So I would consider them individuals too. So, right, thinking about, Austin's asking a good question about discovering new individual donors and investors. I think if you're just starting out, you have to spend a lot of time building your network. And that comes through, yes, Jackie's right, through your board, right? And we'll talk about board members in a minute. But, everything you go to, everywhere you go, they're potential supporters. Everywhere you look, they're potential supporters. So think about the people around you, the parents of the kids who are on your teams. Those are all potential supporters. Volunteers are potential supporters. Obviously, your board, we'll talk about that in a minute. And it's really just capturing them, and everyone is a potential supporter. So put them on your list, whether you have Salesforce or something else or just a spreadsheet, put them on your list because everyone's a potential supporter, right? Let's keep going, Tex. So a quick bit on, and we'll come back to board members, but a quick bit on promotional materials. I used to think that they weren't that important. I mean, I thought they were, it's good to have them. But one thing I learned over the years at Row New York is you want to always look good, right? And I was always believed in the early years, what matters is that we are just running an amazing program. We're running an amazing program for girls in rowing, and we're seeing the changes, and we can provide the data, and we have the narrative, and the promotional pieces were sort of secondary. I almost felt like we're cheapening ourselves by thinking about them too much. And I really did a 180 on that front and realized, what my vantage point of the organization and the girls in boats on the lake in New York City was a very unique access, right, to what was happening on the ground and why our program was worth supporting. And one thing I realized was it's my job to actually help paint that picture for supporters. So that's, at lunches, talking about the program, bringing it to life, bringing kids to opportunities to meet funders. And in place of that, you have to have your materials. So whether that's your website, it's print materials, put the resources into having some nice, clean materials that are really inspiring, right? That are really, that really will get people excited about the programs that you're running. And it's not hard now to find, everyone knows someone who has a nice iPhone. So getting some good pictures, getting some good quotes, putting some resources into some really nice communications. I think that's important. I'm sure all of you can think of a program where you think, I don't think they actually do that much amazing work, but they're so slick and their name is so catchy. I'm not going to name any names, but that they get a lot of support. And, in the perfect world, they're both, right? But I can definitely think of their organizations where they have a great name, they have a great brand, right? So you all I would recommend having a really good brand too. Next, please, Tex. So, yep, and let's keep going. So in terms of, do we have any board members on today? Yes, no? Okay. Oh, good. Perfect. So my biggest piece of advice in terms of boards, and then I'll see if you have any questions, would be, before you put someone on the board, it's almost like a relationship. Like you wouldn't just meet someone and move in with them, or maybe you would. I'm not sure I recommend that either. But I would say you really want to spend some time together. You want to make sure that the organization is a good fit for them, and that they're a good fit for the organization, right? So how do you do that? You get to know them. You ask them to buy a table at your event. You ask them to come to a practice. You ask them to have lunch. You ask them to meet other board members. And then you want to be really clear about the expectations in both directions, right? And so you have it written out and you talk to them about it. Listen, and I've driven so many people away from the board at Row New York, and I'm so glad that I did, because you don't want to be unclear about what the expectations are, and then they get on and they're disappointed, or you're disappointed, or you're both disappointed. It's better to know upfront. So, whatever that is, whether you have a give-get of X amount of money, whether you say, listen, it's really important, we have in-person meetings every quarter, or whatever it is, whatever the expectations are, you really want to be clear about that. And make them, try them out a little bit. So if somebody says, oh, I want to get involved and I want to be on the board, okay, well, see if they come to a practice, see if they come to your gala or any other fundraiser. Follow through, during the sort of trial period of time, then you're going to know, what, that person probably wouldn't make a great board member. And it's the same for them too. They get to know you as a member of the staff or another board member, and then they get to decide, this organization really speaks to me or it doesn't. So I think that that's really important. Do people have any questions about board members at this point? And then Tex, you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, I think we're good on board members. But, oh wait, sorry, go back for 1 second. Tex, sorry, okay. Oh, that's a good question. Board members signing official agreements. No, we haven't, but I know groups that have, so I think it wouldn't be unreasonable. They definitely have to sign confidentiality and conflict of interest forms. That's really important. But we do at Row New York, we had a board member sort of set of expectations. Yes, Luke brings up a very good question. Definitely term limits are super important. And my feeling is 3 years. That's, just my opinion, not in terms of limit. I think each term should be 3 years. And I don't feel strongly one way or the other about term limits, but because if you have a rock star, you don't want to have to say, sorry, in 6 years or 9 years, you have to go. So I don't like that, but the term limits are good, and it's good to have different classes within your board. So like if you have 12 people, have 3 classes of 4, so they don't all cycle off potentially. And the nice thing about a term is that you can say, okay, Sally, your term's coming up in March. This is worst case scenario. You haven't come to a meeting in a year and you haven't made any sort of gift or connected us with your network. We're feeling like maybe this is a time to cycle off naturally. And then it's still an awkward conversation, but it's less awkward because there's a sort of natural ending. So in terms of the staff role, I think it's really important to recognize that, remember that board members are volunteers. And so, they need to really be handled is not the right word. I think it's really being a resource to them is key. So training them on fundraising, giving them the materials they need to be successful in terms of promotional materials or links to articles that come out on the organization. And remembering that board members usually have, ahead of your organization, at the very least, they have their own family and their own careers, right? And so you're like third on the list at best. There could be other things that come ahead of you. So our jobs are to keep bubbling us up on that list to say, listen, when can you meet for coffee? Let's go through your list. Let me answer any questions that you have. And it's not just expecting them to come to you, right? We're managing up to them, in my view, and being a support system to them so that they can be successful in supporting the organization. Does that make sense? Maybe. I feel like I'm just staring at a screen. Oh, good. Thanks, Jackie. All right. So next slide. I'm really excited to bring onto the stage here with me Luke Sims, who is an executive director. So I'm sure he knows a lot about fundraising. And Luke, I would just love to sort of ask you, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What am I missing here? And then I'm sure people will ask questions too. So welcome.
Thank you. Oh man, that's such a great presentation, Amanda. Thank you so much. So I run a relatively small organization. So I think maybe I could be an asset to some people that are in the smaller category in terms of what I'm focused on in fundraising. I'm 95% individuals. We finally closed our first corporate here last year. That was a decent chunk of change. But with the staff that I'm running, a small staff, I haven't gotten to a point yet where I can justify the amount of time it takes to, the heavy lift it takes to turn over a corporate sponsor. So anyway, I mean, wonderful presentation. I'm thankful to be here, and I'd love to be an asset to anybody that would have questions on smaller organizations. We provide sports for children and young adults with special needs, and so we have a relatively small budget, $300,000. And kind of growing rapidly. So I think actually I had a question for you, Amanda. We're in a space where I'm getting to a point. So I do, 99% of the development work, and I like it. I really do. But we're getting to a point where in order to grow, we need to soon bring on a full-time development. And I'm having trouble finding like when that time is. And how beneficial it would be to bring somebody on full-time. We have somebody that does some part-time. I'm thinking maybe there's some other organizations in my space that are kind of like it's hard to pull that trigger because it's a big budget line on a small budget, but it's like, could it be massively impactful for us? And maybe you've dealt with that transition or?
I have been your size. And it's fun. It's fun that Jenny is here because a couple of things. One, good development people are very hard to find. That's been my experience. We all know that the average tenure of a full-time development director is 18 months. That's very challenging. I have gotten to the point where Jenny, I don't know, 5 years ago, Jenny, I wonder if you remember this, had to talk me off the ledge of ours had just left, and I said, forget it, I'm just not going to rehire one. I'm going to go it alone. And she, luckily, as she often did, said, Amanda, take a breath. No, you need a development person. And there, that said about their short tenure, listen, to bring in money, you need to spend money, right? And anyone who says otherwise, they're just wrong about that, in my opinion. And so, and it can feel a little bit scary, like, wait, we don't have a lot of money. But if you're bringing in, they always say a good development person can at least raise their own salary. So if you can bring in someone at the level you're at who can is really organized, who can start to take on some of the, liaising with the board members and getting the board members on board for giving more, then I would say it's worth the quote unquote risk, because if they're good, they're going to actually at least cover their salaries. And that will allow you to grow. So yeah. Someone asked in the chat, this is such a good question, contract for development to pay on results. You can contract for an outside developer to come in. That's tricky, because you want to make sure the person really understands the organization and the mission and the vision and is invested in it and, isn't just sort of writing grants in a corner somewhere. We're not supposed to pay on results. That is really frowned upon by I don't remember what it's called, the Association of Fundraising. Yes, thank you, Luke. So it's definitely frowned upon, and as nonprofits. So you could create a bonus structure to say, listen, I want to incentivize you. That's what we've always done, is like, we're going to pay you more as you do well, but not based on the money that they bring in directly, which we can talk about why. You can have issues around equity when you set that sort of structure up. So, what about the finance person? What about the person who drives the kids to practice? Like, how are they incentivized? So,
Thanks,
if other
Amanda.
questions, or Luke, you have thoughts on that?
No, yeah, feel free to answer other questions coming in the chat. So kind of along the lines of that, and then I have maybe one follow-up on the board side of this. But first, the other tricky one is we're in a space where it's like, when do we start to spend a significant amount of time and effort on grant writing? We spend, most of our time on individuals because they're the best bang for your buck in terms of time and resources for a small staff. And, there's so many grants out there and things, and we've dipped our toe in, and they can be a pretty heavy lift too. And I'm just curious if, have you ever hired part-time grant writers and had success with that? Or
yes,
have you gotten in personally to do some grant writing, or what would be maybe a way to get into it without investing too many resources?
Well, as the executive director of Row New York, the first 7 years, I was the only development person. And so I spent a lot of time writing grants. Mm-hmm. And I think, and we found a lot of success there too. So, and we could do another session sometime if you all want, on grant writing, but it's really, it's part technical, it's part creative, it's part, understanding the mission and vision. So you could absolutely get a part-time person who could come in and just sit with you and say, let me understand what you're doing. They also need to know where to find grants, right, in your community, find the foundations that support what you do. And luckily that's all online now. So you can look at a foundation and see, what are their priorities, and if they align with what you do, it's a letter of inquiry to them or a phone call to their program officer. And the beautiful thing about foundations is that they exist to give money away. So you're not out of line asking them to be supportive. And then it's the same thing. You're building relationships with these program officers. And what's nice is many of them will continue to support year in and year out, and again, with the internet, you can really find, look at similar organizations and see who's the quick and dirty is look in your area at similar organizations and who is supporting them. And
Right.
that's who you look to, right?
Yep.
Because
And we do a lot of
you're-
that for individual, if you can look up where individuals are sometimes donating, and that helps a lot. What's LexisNexis? That's on the chat. Is that a grant tool?
Oh, Luke, you're so young. He's too young to know what LexisNexis is. Didn't we learn about that in elementary school? In the 80s? I think Jackie, you're too young to know about LexisNexis. Isn't that like a clearinghouse for, I don't know, I don't use LexisNexis.
Okay.
I haven't heard about it in a million years.
Just wanted to touch it.
But the Foundation Center Library, good tool.
Right.
Oh, Jackie, that's great. Yeah, I've never used them. But again, the quick and dirty is looking at what are other organizations, who are they getting their grants from that are similar to you. How do you handle lead generation for potential funders? Max is a question. How do you find the leads, like for funders? Like there's a millionaire, billionaire in your area. She was a tennis player. Yes, other than looking at similar organizations. The board, ideally, Max, your board is doing that, and you have a very strategic conversation with them every quarter on, who do you know who knows these people. Look for the people who have played the sports that you support, or that you run. If you're a soccer org, look for those big soccer players. That's what we did for rowing. And then it's just a game of like, who do you know who knows this person? Oh, thank you, Jackie, for that resource. And then you just keep sort of looking through the lists. Like, if I'm meeting, Luke's a board member and I'm meeting with him every quarter. Okay, Luke, you brought up these 5 people. Can you introduce me to them? Did you reach out to this person? What did he say? Will he take a coffee? I mean, it's really just sticking with it and being that person who keeps saying like, okay, Luke, remember that person you said you would call?
Right.
So much of it isn't complicated. It's just being, strategic and determined and not giving up, because it's hard to get momentum. And once you get it, it gets easier.
You got to find a connecting point. That's been the key to all of our fundraising. And I'm sure for you as well, Amanda. And if you work hard enough, everybody has a connecting point somewhere. I mean, if it's somebody that knows somebody, or in my case, we work with people with special needs. So I'm always looking for donors or people that have kids with special needs, or have donated to other groups with needs, because it means there's a little piece in their heart that has some interest in helping people with special needs. And if I know that, it's not that hard to get them to a session and eventually get them to donate. So if I can find that connecting point, it's, that's the success. That's the easier success.
Perfect. I think Benita's here to are you here to move us along?
I am. It's been so enjoyable having you both on this panel and talking about fundraising, which of course is the bread and butter of nonprofit management, and making sure that these organizations can sustain themselves over the long term and keep doing the good work. It's just always a pleasure to hear from you, Amanda, and to learn from you, more importantly. And I'm thrilled that you're now the CEO of US Rowing, so you can bring those SBYD principles and values to the sport of rowing more broadly. So it's just really important. We appreciate your time. You have very particular and applicable expertise on fundraising, and I think you've made us all feel a little bit more comfortable and prepared with something, particularly post-COVID, that we all really need to dig our heels in and do more of. So thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. That was a great presentation.
No, my pleasure. And anytime you all want to continue the conversation, there's a lot more we could dig in on, and love doing things with you folks. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Luke, too, it was wonderful to hear directly from you as one of our FundPlay partners. And thanks for being part of our first FundPlay Summit and offering your perspective as well. So thanks to you both. I learned a lot. Relationship building, relationship building, relationship building. That's the key. And honestly, if you think of it less as fundraising and more as just making new friends and that have a similar interest, then it seems that is a less probably stressful way to approach fundraising, right?
Yes, it's so true. Just eat a lot of meals with them. Back in the day when we ate meals with people.
And 2-hour conversations with billionaires don't sound too bad to me.
It's not bad.
So good luck with that. Thanks again to all of you for being here with us. From hearing first thing, top of the noon hour from Assemblywoman Monica Wallace with Tom Ferry, to the panel that I moderated with the LA Dodgers and Hello Insight and Upmetrics, to just now with Amanda and Luke. We're just so grateful for all of you, the passionate and mission-driven experts who joined us today, and for all of you in the audience. We hope you were inspired to learn more about being a FundPlay partner of ours at League Apps and take advantage of the free software that we're offering to all of you. It's our mission to make youth sports happen in all communities, and we look forward to working with each of you. So, for all of us, it's been a really challenging year, from the reckoning with racism in our society to the loss and trauma of very many loved ones from COVID-19. And our work is cut out for us to ensure that young people and ourselves stay safe and healthy and happy. And I believe that sports can really be a vehicle to play a huge role in that. And so we have a responsibility to make youth sports accessible and safe and fun for youth, because we know, as we talked about on the data panel, that the social, emotional, and physical benefits are true and profound. So, for me personally, my kids are better students because they're better athletes, and they're better athletes because they're good students. And those connections with the peers, their peers, are deeper and more authentic. They're better self-advocates. They're better time managers and goal setters, and maybe just a little bit of overachievers as well, based upon the fact that they're moms and Olympic gold medalists. But all of that came from their sports participation. And so I say all that to say, all that you do is so important, intentionally using this power of sport to change children's lives. And so thank you again for being here, for what you do every day to help propel kids to have better lives. So stay tuned and follow up. We'll have some follow-up emails and information. We'll have recordings from today and additional resources. And if you have any feedback for us or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.